Hello et bienvenue. We are the creative committee for the Canadian Women's Brass Collective. On est super contente de vous offrir quelques présentations spéciales.
We are professional musicians who have joined forces to celebrate our mutual love and commitment to the world of brass.
We are performers, educators, researchers, and conductors.
We are soloists, members of orchestras, chamber groups, military bands, new music, and early music ensembles.
Our aim is to raise awareness of gender diversity, to foster positive attitudes, and to provide inspiration and role models for the next generation.
In 2019, we met for our first conference, That's What She Said, a week of masterclasses, workshops, roundtable discussions, an excerpt competition, and of course, concerts.
You can check out videos from That's What She Said and past online events on our YouTube channel.
Plus, join our Facebook or Instagram to find out about our upcoming events.
Nous sommes fiers de partager nos idées avec vous aujourd'hui.
We would love to hear from you. Please comment or ask questions in the chat on any of our platforms, and we'll do our best to answer them all.
We are working on future online events, so send us any topics or suggestions that you would like us to cover. All ideas are welcome.
Thanks for joining us.
We are the Canadian Women's Brass Collective.
Hello and welcome. This is so exciting to be here, and thank you so much to the Canadian Women's Brass Collective. It's really an amazing organization to be a part of, and of course the CWBC includes the creative team that you just saw on that opening video, and it also includes all of the presenters for any of the events, and it also includes anybody who is female and plays a brass instrument in Canada. So welcome everybody, and our demographic is the whole world. So we are thrilled to be online right now for all of you on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. And this session will be archived and will be available later on the CWBC website. So this is an exciting day. My name is Merrie and I'm the trumpet professor at the University of Victoria here in British Columbia. And previous to starting this position in 2016, I played principal trumpet in Canadian orchestras for 21 years. And today we have 4 wonderful sessions for you. And I have some colleagues here from the Western provinces, and we're always excited to be a part of these events that really are cross-Canada happenings, because in the West here, we just grab onto any opportunity that we can to be involved in those big things that are happening elsewhere in the country as well. So this is a wonderful connector. It's an amazing way to spend a day with some of my friends, my colleagues, and with all of you, the viewers. So our goal in this symposium today, and also in the CWBC really, is to share some knowledge, to share some experience, some personal stories, to have some discussions that inspire learning, dissolve some stigmas, create some safety. So the CWBC is really all about visibility and mentorship and creating safety for us to just talk about our lives as women, as brass players, as members of the community. So the first topic is music education in Canada. And before I go into that, I would just like to acknowledge what we mean by Canada. So Canada, as we know, is a land that has been occupied by Indigenous people for thousands of years. This is their land, this is their home. We are visitors to this land. I'm a white settler descendant, and although Canada has been my home for my entire life, I acknowledge that I am a visitor to this land. I'm in my office on the UVic campus here, and I'm on Lekwungen speaking territory. So this is home of the Esquimalt, WSÁNEĆ, and Songhees nations. And it is a daily privilege for me to be able to make music and to teach here. So just another reminder that these sessions are being archived on the website, and you'll be able to watch them later, but we hope that you're here with us joining live. So I'm thrilled to be able to introduce our first speaker today. It's Alana Johnson. And Alana is a music teacher here in Victoria. She's also a trumpet player and, in fact, a UVic trumpet graduate from when Lou Ranger was the professor here. And Alana is also from the matriarchal lineage of the Haida Gwaii. And she is very active in studying and sharing her culture with the community, with her students, with colleagues. And we're really blessed to have Alana in Victoria and for her to be such an advocate and an activist in this way. So welcome, Alana.
Wow, that was a really flattering introduction. Thank you, Merrie. Alana Johnson, Hanudi Ki Gaga, Ruth Parrish, Hanudi Auga Ki Gaga, Anne Williams, Hanudi Nanga Ki Gaga, T'alang Kaichalga, T'alang Kianus Liga. My name is Alana Johnson. My mother's name is Ruth Parrish, and my grandmother's name was Anne Williams. And we are from the Raven matrilineage of Haida Gwaii, and we belong to the Kianusli House. I'm also British on many sides, as you can see, and I cling on to that heritage that I have, that rich heritage I have from all parts of who I am. I am also coming from Lekwungen territory as Merrie. I am also in Victoria, and very happy and to have always been able to call this my home since I was born. But as you'll hear today, you'll also hear the way that I speak about Haida Gwaii as my home as well. So I'm going to start with a poem, and then we'll get into sort of the meaty parts. Poems have a way of speaking to us in a way that just a sort of giving of information can't. And because I'm going to be talking about land acknowledgements today, I really wanted to express an understanding of what we mean by land. So this is a poem that my mom wrote after a visit to Haida Gwaii. Yeah, so here we go. This is an old Nanai story of Haida Gwaii. Old Nanai walked along the beach road in the drizzling rain. As she walked past the old graveyard, she remembered that her mom used to love walking in the rain. She never understood how that was true, but now as she walked in her mother's footsteps, she did. And her walk became a poem walk. She walked on the grassy knoll, looking out toward the sea that undulated toward shore. For hundreds of thousands of years, clean, growling waves rolled onto this land. She stood mesmerized, trying to memorize the sound, trying to capture the grayness of the sky. The drops of rain mingled with her tears. The waves sang a song of unending faithfulness as she stood, of cleansing, of security. She stood absorbed in the depths. She belonged to this land. She walked along the grass, looking for the exquisite fungi that dotted the shoreline. For hundreds of thousands of years, comical, fantastical fungi popped up into this landscape. She studied the big brown buttons, trying to understand their place, trying to remember what she knew of the mycelium, how the root system connects, communicates, and nourishes the earth. They sighed a song of deep relationships as she stood, of quietness, of caring. She stood marveling at the lessons. She belonged to this land. She walked along the road, enjoying the rainy quietness of the day. For thousands and thousands of years, a people lived on this land. She visualized the longhouses and the monumental poles, trying to fathom the seasons of life, trying to understand their interconnectedness. These were a people who loved this homeland. They drummed a song of Haida Gwaii as she stood, of story, of family. She stood appreciating the history. She belonged to this land. So that sort of encapsulates everything that I want to talk about today, but now we get to go into the nitty-gritties of land acknowledgements, what they are, how we can do them, and why they're important. So a land acknowledgement in its simplest form is just acknowledging the place where you stand. It's acknowledging the people who have been here for thousands of years and who have stewarded it for all of that time, taking care of it. Why do we do land acknowledgements? I know that this can often come from a place of obligation or even guilt. It's just this thing that we have to do at the beginning of an event, or it's a thing that we feel so bad for being white settlers here that have stolen land, and like we feel like we need to do something to make it okay, and so we say the people's land who we're on, and those are both really actually opposite to what a land acknowledgement should be. So I'm going to give an example, a story of me being on Musqueam territory. Several years ago, there was a pole raising at UBC, and I was able to be there with my mom and my brother back before COVID, when we could actually have hundreds of people in the same place, which will be amazing again soon. But we were able to be there and watch this pole being raised. Before the pole was raised, there were hours of speeches. Every person, doesn't matter who they were, what nation they belonged to, it was a Haida pole being raised on Musqueam territory. So that was very significant, that the Musqueam Nation was giving their blessing that a Haida pole could be raised on their land. So there were so many thank yous and so many speeches saying why this pole was important and the relationships that were built there. Every single speech started with a land acknowledgement, acknowledging where they were and acknowledging the host nation. So it's not just a thing that white people do at the beginning of an event. This is a thing that we as Haida people did at the beginning of this event as well. Anytime we went on to someone else's land, we recognized the people that were there. So this isn't a new thing. This is real protocol that's been around for a long, long time. Land acknowledgements give us some perspective on our belonging. So it actually gives us a place. It gives us the opportunity to relate to this land that we're on. And when we can be in relationship with that land, we can live and walk with so much more love and respect for all of the beings around us. In Braiding Sweetgrass, which if you don't read any other books this year, read this book, Braiding Sweetgrass. She actually talks about becoming indigenous to a place. So it might be a place that your people have not known for very long, but we can create relationships with the land, with the other than human beings around us, that we can, and that land acknowledgement gives us the opportunity to express that. We get to express our relationship to the land. So it's like another way of thinking about it, acknowledging the land is like giving the thank yous at the beginning of your performance. So you're already saying thank you to the land, to the people who have been here for so long and have made it possible for us to be here. And the beauty that we get to experience now that we live on this land. And it's also acknowledging that we are still here. There was a myth for a long time that all of the indigenous people were gone, right? And like you'd walk into space and it'd be like, oh, you're from where? What? That's not a thing, is it? You're still around? Yeah, we're still here. And so by doing that land acknowledgement, we're actually getting rid of a lot of toxic history, and saying these people are still here and they still are stewards and in relationship with this land in a way that I will probably never experience. But I can still be a part of that. We're invited to be a part of that relationship with the land. And land acknowledgements have a direct correlation to what we do. So we cannot do what we do without the land. Like we can't be here. So in almost every creation story you hear, all of creation is already set up before the human beings come to exist. The humans are like the last thing that gets placed into this beautiful earth that we get to be a part of. So it's not just acknowledging, it's very important, it's not just acknowledging the people that have been here, but it is actually acknowledging that we recognize the land as something so vital and important to who we are. So when we get into the when this happens and who does this, it should happen at the beginning of an event, like Merrie just did. She's hosting the event, and so she did the acknowledgement. It's appropriate after that acknowledgement to ask someone from the local community to welcome people to the land. They're not welcoming people to your event. They're welcoming people onto their land. And that's very appropriate, but after the host has done the land acknowledgement. I know that I have been asked to do land acknowledgements at the beginning of an event, and I quickly say, no, that's for you to do. You're the host, and you get to take on that responsibility and that important part of the event. And where should it be done? This should be done front and center stage. It's not something that just sort of gets like glossed over at the beginning and you're reading off the script that your organization made. And it can be in the program. I've gone into places where it's on the wall right when you walk in. A lot of schools have that now, in libraries. So you can check that out in your performance spaces as well. Is that front and center? Is that something that everybody can see as soon as they walk in? And I think this is the most important part. Questions for yourself before you do a land acknowledgement. So why are you as an individual doing this land acknowledgement? And this takes some soul searching. And second off, why is your organization doing this? So I talked about before, we shouldn't be coming at it from the perspective of guilt or like just obligation. But we should have, in order to do a land acknowledgement properly, we need to actually have a relationship with the land. And we need to have a relationship with the people who have been on this land for so long. And how will you, going off of that, how will you make this land acknowledgement your own? So are you just going to read the text that your organization hands to you, or can you express it in a way that shows that you personally have experienced this relationship with the land and with the peoples who have been here? And one detail that often gets missed, can you say all the names correctly that are in there? Okay, I have been to so many events where somebody just completely butchers the name. And I'm not saying like, yes, you can do your research and then you do your best, right? Some sounds are just not in the language that we know the best. And so they're just not going to sound 100% authentic. I totally understand that. But when someone's standing there reading something and like, trying to like sound it out properly, oh, it's so embarrassing. Like it's so like, oh, just cringing the whole time. So just make sure you've done your homework before you're standing up there and trying to say some of these very difficult names to say if we're English speakers. So do make sure you do your homework. And also don't go up there being like, I'm going to totally butcher this, because that also just like, it's like if you walked up in front of everyone and you're like, I didn't practice this piece enough, so I'm probably not going to play it exactly like I'm supposed to. So don't do any of those things. Just walk there confidently with grace and with sincerity, and you will be doing a land acknowledgement correctly. So I want to do I want to read one more poem that I wrote, and then I'm just going to end with a question for you to think about. So this poem came from, I've only been on Haida Gwaii 3 times in my life. It just has never been a thing that we get to do every year or whatever. But my experiences going back there, I will express in this poem, and I think that you'll be able to understand better why these land acknowledgements are so important. My feet know this land, even though they have never stepped here before. My nanai and all of her nangalung are buried here. The Kunisi urge me to walk softly. Remove your sandals, for the place where you walk is sacred. Kwaiga to guiding, guarding, standing tall. Full of power, roots reaching deep into the earth where she began her life journey hundreds of years ago. Huya reminds me of their teachings each time they call. Will I practice Yahgudang today, or will I be tricked into gluttony again? Taula falls across the sky, telling me that the sky and earth people are equally alive, equally vibrant, ready to teach if I am ready to learn. Skaukandala on their overgrown bushes. Slow down, enjoy the moments of sweetness. Taste and see that the land is good. Jijigaga announces my arrival in the forest. All the forest people listen and see who this new intruder is. Will I listen too? Will I recognize that they know this land, this sky and water better than I do? Kasha, feel the sacred dirt under your feet. Let the rocks speak wisdom. They say, we are still here. We are still here. We are still here. And I echo them softly. We are still here. So once you have done your land acknowledgement, now what? That's the question that we continue with. And I'm wondering, Merrie, I think I'm going to the end of my time here. Do we have time for that song at the end here?
Absolutely, yeah. We'd love to hear that song. So you
Great.
go ahead.
Okay, so I'll introduce this song and then we'll play it. This is a song in light of recent news that has come forward from Kamloops and now from Manitoba and several other places. This is not really news to people who have been a part of this conversation, but it was very shocking because there was no expectation of this happening at this point in time. We are so grieved. And I say this without very much feeling in my voice because otherwise I'll just sort of start crying. But we are very grieved by the history of residential schools, the history of colonization that was happening before residential schools, and the attempts to wipe out this beautiful wisdom and the ways of life that have been so vital to this land for so long. And we're particularly thinking of our children, the children who were lost. So this song is by Cheryl Sewapagaham. She's Cree Dene, and she I always want to say wrote, but we don't write songs. She created this song. She composed this song to recognize the beauty and the resilience and the challenges also that children face as children. So this is a children's blessing song. And you can use this as a moment of remembrance, a moment of silence, if that's something that you would like to do. You'll see my daughter in this video as well. And she comes along with me to most events and gets to be a part of the drumming and singing too. So I'll just end with this. Gachagai kuyada ka talang good kanankaska. We will remember our beautiful, precious children.
Are you ready to play, Alana? Nanu in. Ready? Merrie, you're muted.
I had myself unmuted and then I must have pressed it again. Thank you, Alana. That was wonderful. Wonderful to hear your words and to see your beautiful daughter and hear the song by Cheryl. So thank you so much for all of that sharing with us.
Sure.
And we're going to move forward now to our next speaker. And it is somebody that I have known for a very long time. That's Samantha Whelan. And Sam and I actually were in high school together at the Western Canada High School in Calgary. And we both played in my dad's bands. And we have lots of stories to share from stage band and concert band and tours. And then we both went on to the University of Calgary and did our trumpet degree at exactly the same time. And we both went on to master's degrees, different schools, but at the same time. And we both did the National Youth Orchestra of Canada together for 2 summers. And that was great. So Sam has remained very close in my life as a friend and as a colleague. And it's been really inspiring and really amazing to watch the trajectory of her career and how she has incorporated her life as a musician, as an educator, as a storyteller, as a community builder into the work that she does. And so she has had opportunity to be a real advocate for cross-cultural learning and has worked alongside Indigenous artists in some of her work. And so I think that she's going to share a little bit about that with us. So welcome, Samantha.
Thank you, Merrie, and thank you, Alana. That was one of the most beautiful descriptions of a land acknowledgement I've heard, and I've heard a lot of them. So I can't thank you, and thank you for sharing your poetry and your song. That was absolutely beautiful. So my name is Samantha Whelan-Kokis, and I am in beautiful Calgary, Alberta, Canada today. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot people, the Nakota people of the Stoney Nation, the Beaver people of the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and all the people who make their homes in Treaty 7 territory in southern Alberta. And I would like to acknowledge my immense gratitude and respect for the traditional landowners who have cared for our earth for generations and who continue to protect her today, because I find my joy from the earth and from nature and from being in nature. And without those people who have cared for our earth, as Alana so beautifully said in the first part of the session, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to do the beautiful things that we're able to do. So thank you so much. So as Merrie pointed out, I started my career at the University of Calgary with a Bachelor of Music in Education. So Merrie was in performance, I was in education, but I loved the trumpet. So I always dabbled in it and did recitals and thought, well, maybe someday I'll do something that has to do a little bit with the trumpet. And in about year 3 or 4, and a lot to do with Merrie, actually, because Merrie was somebody who I really looked up to and beautiful trumpet player. I decided I wanted to spend a bit more time working on the trumpet. And both of us went to Domaine Forget. She didn't mention that part. We studied with Mr. Chikowitz at Domaine Forget. And he pulled me aside and he said, Samantha, I don't say this often, but I think if you wanted to do trumpet, you could. And then he had his Mr. Chikowitz laugh where he was like, but it's really hard to get a job in this field. We love him. We loved him. We still love him. He's a real mentor to us. So I continued on after my undergrad degree, and I did a master's degree in trumpet performance at the University of Houston, which was a real departure for me and an exciting 2 years of my life where I really developed as a trumpet player and really enjoyed that piece. But as far as sliding door moments go, I was listening to a beautiful podcast by Brené Brown where she's interviewing 2 men and they were talking about sliding door moments. I think my sliding door moment happened after National Youth Orchestra, and it happened after my master's degree when I took a lesson with Barbara Butler. And at that point she was at Eastman. And it was a 2.5-hour lesson, and I was hoping she would say, come do your doctorate with me. So you can do your doctorate, it'll be amazing. But that's not what she said. I started telling her about the work I was doing in music education. I started telling her about the storytelling I was doing. And she said, do that. Do that, and do that really well, she said, because then people will come to you and you don't have to move. You can stay wherever you are in the world. So it really, and she was the only female trumpet player that I'd ever had a lesson with professionally at that point in my life and then in my career. So I think it's really important I mention her on my journey and why she's been such an important person in my life. So I did do that. I came back to Alberta. I went to the Banff Center and I started writing stories. And that brought me onto a whole different path. So my advice as far as music education goes is always stay open to whatever opportunities present themselves. Be open to what's going to show themselves. And I started something called teaching artistry. And I didn't know it was called that at the time. I just started doing this thing called teaching artistry. And as I got into it, I met I read a book called The Teaching Musician's Bible by Eric Booth. The Teaching Musician's Bible. I read the first chapter and I immediately had to get a hold of him. I stalked him online and I found him and I wrote him a note and I said, "You're describing my life. I'm a teaching artist." So for those who don't know what a teaching artist is, I like to read exactly his definition because it's exactly right. A teaching artist is an active artist whose artistry expands to include the skills, curiosities, and habits of action of an educator in order to achieve a wide variety of learning goals in, through, and about the arts with a wide range of learners. I can't say that better. When I read it, I was like, that's me. That's what I do. And so I'm constantly walking this line of making sure that I'm an active artist, and that's as a storyteller and a trumpet player. And then I'm also always trying to build my skills and curiosities and habits of actions to be a very good educator. So that in a nutshell is who I am. In 2005, the National Arts Centre came to Alberta and they were looking for teaching artists that could go out into the school communities. And they were particularly looking for somebody who could speak French and English. They learned very quickly in Alberta that was a tall order, and they ended up deciding to hire 3 teaching artists. So I was one of the first teaching artists that they brought in to work into the communities. And I remember I had just had 2 babies, and they asked if I could go into 75 schools. And I said, there's no way. There is no way. So I think that first year I did 10 to 12 schools. Anyway, in 2006, it was just before the government was making big shifts and offering an apology to the Indigenous people of Canada, which happened in 2008. They were starting to look at going into Indigenous communities, and they asked me if I would be their Indigenous liaison. I remember I said, stay open to opportunities. I said, yes, of course. Like, I'll go work with kids in the reserves. And so I was driving out to the reserves and I was working with these kids teaching Vivaldi, Mozart, and Beethoven. And I was thinking, Vivaldi, Mozart, and Beethoven, they're pretty cool. And I love them and I love their music. And I do. I love all that there is about it. But there was just something fundamentally that I was like, dude, interesting. So I had a real dear friend, her name's Cheryl Sue Pegaham, and Alana sang one of her songs. And Cheryl knew I was going to her reserve in Wabasca in northern Alberta. And she said, Sam, if you're gonna have to drive 9 hours, do you mind if I drive with you? And so she hopped in the car and the 2 of us laughed our way up to northern Alberta. And I said, if you're going to be there with me, rather than just visit your grandmother, visit your grandmother, but why don't you come into the schools with me and we'll see if the National Arts Centre will give you an honorarium. And they did exactly that. And we spent an entire day in the elementary school together. And the principal at the school sat us down and said, you girls, you don't know what you did today. And of course, both Cheryl and I were like, oh no, what did we do today? Like, we thought maybe we were in trouble. We weren't in trouble. This was an elder in the community, and she's much wiser than both of us were. And she said, you 2 have shown each other respect for what you do and your cultures all day. You've done more good work than you can ever possibly fathom. And that was the beginning of a cross-cultural relationship that I ended up having with Cheryl for the National Arts Centre for 4.5 years. So we ended up working together in schools all throughout Alberta. I don't think Cheryl and I have stayed within the Alberta borders, but it's starting to spread now all the way across Canada. So I do want to mention something here, just for when people are looking to build these kind of relationships and looking to work with Indigenous artists, that it's called a relationship. You have to build the relationship. You can't do it just because you think it's cool to maybe work with an Indigenous artist. And so what I'm seeing now, after 15 years of having worked with Indigenous artists, is people calling me up to ask, and I'm like, it's not me you have to build a relationship with. I can lead you to a person who I think you might have a good relationship with, but I can't guarantee that relationship is going to work. You must build relationship. And that means, doing some things. I've done some things in the last 4 years because I'm really, really trying to get into the communities that are around here to create with Indigenous artists. You can't force anything though. It takes time and it takes years, not months, and not 1 year, years to build relationship. So Cheryl left me as my cross-cultural teaching partner in 2014 to pursue music therapy. She went back to university. And my new teaching partner was found through a website. The National Arts Center found him on a website. And they were like, well, what do you think, Sam? And I was like, well, I haven't met him. I don't know what I think until I meet him. So Walter McDonald Whitebear came into my life. And I will tell you, the relationship was not as quick as what it was with Cheryl. Cheryl and I had been friends before we worked for the National Arts Center. Walter and I came to each other kind of, it was like, it was like a blind date. We kind of got thrown together because he was and I was and whatever. We have been working together now for 7 years, but I would say that relationship, and I think Walter would agree with me, it took 3.5 years to build. So trust, like it takes a lot of trust, and it takes showing up for each other, because it's a two-way relationship. It's both people have to show up for each other. And so, going on 7 years, and I would say the art that we have created together and the work that we've done with students all across Canada has been some of the work that I'm the most proud of, honestly, in my role as a teaching artist. Because I do want to give Valerie some time to speak, I'm just going to talk. Oh, yes, Valerie, we're going to get to you. I just want to talk about the threads that teaching artistry covers, because most people don't understand all the different ways we can use our skills as artists to really bring alive a community. And so one of the ways is just to enhance the encounter with artworks. Alana, I can already tell you're amazing at that. I mean, to bring poetry in, to bring spoken word in, to bring music in, and enhance a child's experience of that artwork, because your work as a teaching artistry brings them in and shows them how they can go into that piece of artwork. The other thing is to develop art making skills. So, in my trumpet career, teaching them how to play the trumpet really well and making sure they know other scales and all those kind of things. Arts integration is when you bring in other content. So you pull in social studies, you pull in science, you pull in all of these other subject matters. That's arts integration. Community life, I've gone into senior citizens' homes and or older people. I'm told not to say senior citizens. It's older people's homes. And I've worked with the older people in order to bring their life story to life with high school students. So it's a way of enriching the community you're in. I am working with Indigenous artists. I am creating with Indigenous artists, and we're hopefully going to launch a project that we've been working on for 4 years this fall. Relationship took a long time, and we're working in the community to try and help the community. Activism. Social, political or social movements. We can use our art form to bring alive those social or political movements. We can help develop personal or social capacities in our communities. And then the one that I never really did understand was this digital component. And now we've all lived through a pandemic, and we understand what it is to activate our artistry in a digital realm. And we're even doing it today. We're able to reach out to more people because we have this digital component. And let me tell you, my first 4.5 months of this whole digital thing were not fun. And I was not fun to live with. This especially being a trumpet player, because and anyone who plays a brass instrument, we overspeak all of these microphones. So those are the different ways we can be a teaching artist. That is who I am. The driver and the essence of who I am is that I love to create. So any place that I walk into, what I would like to think is I plant seeds so that they can grow and we can create and we can make a better world and we can move forward together in this better place. We all want to feel that the time that we've spent on this earth helps bring us forward that much more. So that's me, and that's teaching artistry, and that's some of the work that I've done. And thanks again for having me, Merrie.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. Really, really inspiring to hear your stories, and I just love the opportunity to hear about your work and just be infused with your spirit. I was going to say infectious spirit, and I suppose that is correct use of the word, but anyway, you get the idea. We love you.
Love you too.
And actually, this is a good segue because, Sam was somebody who needed to think outside the box of how she was going to make an impact, how she was going to be creative, how she was going to live her dream as a trumpet player, as a musician, and, really tap into what her skills are. In Victoria, we've just had a really, deep struggle, I would say, with the school district here, who is cutting a lot of funding for music programs in schools. And the support of the community and, the activism, the protests and the initiatives that were brought forward were huge, really, really spectacular. And all of that was great because we have built an even stronger sense of community. In the end, of course, it didn't make an impact, and that can be on the actual budget. That can be disillusioning and frustrating, but it also, we can see the positives that have come out of this and realize that we are a stronger team recognizing the value of the arts. So any of you who are listening that are thinking of a career in the arts, in music, and are doing a degree, there are so many options. Just listen to your core, listen to your inner voice, and observe around you what is happening and think, how can I fit into that? So we're going to hear a little bit later at the end of this session, a little snippet from something that Samantha and Walter Whitebear have done. And also, I don't know, some of you who are listening just along these same lines, there's a couple of organizations, Learning Through the Arts, which has dissolved in some areas of the country, but it was very, very active throughout the country in other areas. My good friend Karen McClelland in Windsor has started a similar organization called Arts Can Teach, and she was with Learning Through the Arts for a long time. And so arts can teach. They really, really can. And with that, I am going to introduce our next speaker. And this is a real pleasure. Valerie Whitney is the Horn Professor at the University of British Columbia. So we are peers and colleagues here on the west coast of Canada in academia. And we also share an alma mater. So we are both Northwestern grads. And of course, in the brass world, that may not be so unusual, but it's still fun. And we still feel a kinship for sure, having spent time on that Evanston campus. So Valerie is going to join us for the final session today, and we're going to talk a little bit about brass pedagogy. And of course, we know this is a volatile landscape for musicians, young musicians graduating with a music degree, but there are ways to reinvent, what that can mean for you. And Valerie is going to take us through a few ideas of her own and a little bit of her own experience. So welcome, Valerie.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Merrie. And thank you to Sam and Alana for what you've shared already. And I want to thank you, especially Alana, for your very eloquent explanation of what we're saying when we're giving these land acknowledgements. Being relatively new to Canada, this isn't something that we do in the States so much. So I am very much on my very steep learning curve of kind of experiencing what these things mean and letting it impact me. So in that spirit, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work and from which I'm coming to you today is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And that pole, Alana, that you mentioned is one that I walk past every day when I walk to and from work, and every day I'm struck by its the strength and the beauty and the peace that is represented in that pole. So thank you for bringing that up today too. I actually, this is a perfect segue, and I think Sam, you actually kind of said basically what I was going to say when we're thinking about creativity in our music careers and kind of the power that the arts in general have. I think, it's no secret that it's challenging to establish a career outside of an established performance organization, like an orchestra or military job, or even a teaching job is not your easy answer anymore these days. So, it's tricky, but, thankfully we as musicians and artists in general, we tend to be quite resilient and comfortable with certain risk, possibly comfortable with more risk than certainly our parents might want us to be. But really, if we love what we're doing, we're not looking for an enormous salary. And we're, like Sam said, we are wanting to contribute. As artists, we are people who have something to say. And anything that we have to say in whatever kind of context or small community, small or large community, is really important. So I'm going to just talk kind of broadly for a second about kind of what the arguing for the value of the arts. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but I think we need to understand in ourselves as artists why we are not only relevant but crucial. And I think that sometimes that's hard for us when we're in it to really understand. I remember when I was certainly when I was an undergrad, when I was going through my graduate degree, especially in my doctorate, I remember I got really burned out. And actually I went into Gail one day about 2 years into my degree, and I said, Gail, I'm done. I'm quitting. I'm going to finish this degree because I've already put 2 years in, but I'm quitting music. Once I'm done, I'm done. I'm out of here. There's nothing in this for me. Very wisely, she said, okay, all right. Well, let's move on today, and thankfully at the time I had a very important mentor who was given to me. And he really helped me to understand myself as an artist. And I think one of my main questions that I always had was, I spend so much time in a practice room all by myself, investing in myself. What am I doing to help the person around the corner? There are still hungry people. There are still children who don't have parents. What am I doing? And over the years, I wrestled with this really hard. But what through the mentorship that I had with this person and a community of just very wise people helped me to understand that the arts have something to communicate. What the arts do is that they help us to understand ourselves first. It's how we gauge our personal sense of well-being, and it's how we express and gauge the well-being of the community around us. And so the arts have this very inherent power that I think for that reason alone, it is worthwhile pursuing developing our musical capacities. And in order for us to be able to communicate effectively and say whatever it is that we're saying, whether that's through, in our case, it's brass playing. In other people's case, it might be through being a great dancer or being a great actor or a great sculptor or architect, any one of these. It's on us to develop the ability to be able to articulate what we have to say as cleanly and eloquently as possible. So in our case, that means we need to develop our technique to the point where we can say what it is that we have to say and be able to be heard and understood. Broadly speaking, to me, that's why I think it's still very worthwhile to pursue a music degree. I think it's very easy, especially when we're in school, to look at the landscape and not get kind of hyper focused on this one track career of, I must win that orchestra job, I must get that teaching position, I must win that competition. I think, music programs historically have been guilty of kind of pushing this kind of one-sided approach. But what I think is so wonderful about the lineup of people that are presenting today and talking that we've already heard today is that the arts and music especially has the capacity to kind of go into any realm and be relevant and be effective and influence what's happening there. When I was doing my graduate work, I was also working basically full-time with a chamber ensemble in Chicago called the Fifth House Ensemble, who's a wonderful organization. At the same time that we were doing kind of standard chamber music concerts, we were also going into high schools and working with established curriculum and bringing music into the classroom there. So one of the first residencies I did was in a math classroom. We went into the juvenile detention centers and did residencies with the residents there, and did kind of co-created projects with them. One really kind of cool thing that I at first thought didn't have any relevance was that our wind quintet did a concert at the Kellogg Innovation Network Conference, which is just a forum that happens at Northwestern every few years, where business executives and kind of innovation managers get together and, I guess, innovate. And our wind quintet played a concert there, and then we talked about how what we do as chamber musicians is relevant and can be used and is actually necessary and needed for the skills for these business executives. And I went into that thinking, what does this have to do with anything? These two worlds are so separate. And by the end of it, people were coming up to us saying, that was amazing. We need to know more about this. What we have to do as musicians is we need to teach the world how to relate to each other in a way. And so maybe I'm being really broad. I think every one of us, regardless of whether we are going to be working primarily professionally as a musician, in other words, earning our income primarily on our instrument, or it being something that is supplemental, or just something that we do in our spare time because it feeds us. We have something important to say and relevant to say in whatever context we find ourselves. And to me, that's the biggest argument for being optimistic about pursuing music, pursuing a career in music, pursuing a degree in music. If you want some more nitty gritty, just, some thoughts that I have that are probably not new. That the music degree is a really great launching pad into pretty much anywhere. I think it's pretty well known that, especially medicine and law schools are very favorable towards musicians, because they're looking for diverse candidates who have a track record of, problem solving, manual dexterity, teamwork, collaboration, just longevity in self-discipline. So one thing that I want to point out is that I just came across this week, the World Economic Forum just published their Future of Jobs report for 2025. So what are the skills that are going to be the most needed and most looked for by employers in the next 5 years? And there are 10 of them. I won't read all of them, but it's all at the top of the list is analytical thinking and innovation, active learning, learning strategies, complex problem solving, critical thinking and analysis, resilience, stress tolerance and flexibility, creativity, originality, initiative. All of these things is what the World Economic Forum is saying. People are going to need all of these skills by 2025 for the jobs that are coming. Technology is number 10. Analytical thinking and innovation is number 1. And so when I look at this, I think, why not pursue music? All of these things, whether we do it professionally or we do it on the side, is going to give us the skills that we need to land in whatever role we're in. And then I know we're kind of running short on time here, but just to close, I'll just close with this favorite quote that I have that I think we've all heard it. Beware of artists. They mix with all classes of society and are therefore the most dangerous. And I take that as a encouragement that we're important. And yeah, I don't know if any of the rest of you have anything to add to that, but I think it's easy to look at our landscape and think, oh, there's no jobs. There's it might look a little dismal, but actually that's the place where creative people step in and have the most impact. So I think there's really good reason to be very optimistic about what we do. The problem, of course, is the age-old issue of like Merrie was saying, advocating and getting the rest of the world to understand that what we have to offer is actually really also important. But the truth is that's been the case for history. So maybe things aren't that much different than they have been in the past. We're always going to be trying to argue for our existence, but that doesn't mean that we're not relevant. We are so relevant. So anyway, that's my soapbox. I know we're running out of time here, but feel free to add.
Well, that's fantastic, Valerie. Yeah, really wonderful to hear your thoughts. And yeah, Alana just raised her hands to you, and I raised my hands to all three of you, because really it's so special, to be spending this time together and to hear your insights. And Valerie, just a couple thoughts about things you were saying. Every time I thought, oh yeah, and I'm going to just throw in this idea, you said it. And oh yeah, I'm just going to throw in, oh yeah, and you said it. Yeah. And some of those things were, for example, why is it important that, places like the economics and law and medicine are valuing a music degree? And it's because of this ability to process so many inputs at one time, as well as being part of a team, but being singularly autonomously responsible for your own product. And to be able to have that awareness is a skill you know, and that's a skill we learn in music school.
Yeah.
You know, university was never meant to be a trade school. There's the, you know, conservatory model, which is more like a trade school. But university is a place of learning, of discovery, you know, of exploration.
Yeah.
And in doing that, as Valerie mentioned, you will become an advocate for what skills you're actually developing. And then you need to be able to verbalize that. And that, just like, you know, learning the technique on your instrument takes practice. And it's worth just, you know, sitting down and making a list of those skills and those strengths that you have developed as a musician in getting your degree. So
yeah, and Merrie, I would just add to that real quick that I think, you know, if you really are wanting to say I'm going to stay in music exclusively, which is great. My word of advice would be to diversify your skill sets even inside music, so that you have skills outside of your primary instrument, or that in your primary instrument you are flexible across genres. So what I'm seeing a lot of today, and what we're talking about a lot at UBC, is how do we bring more improvisation into what we're doing, because that gives you flexibility. So diversification of your skill sets even inside music gives you a lot more kind of avenues to pursue after your degree, including, you know, technology, music tech, arranging, composing, improvising, being fluent in cross genres. That's kind of where I encourage my students towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. And we just have a question in the comments. I don't know, Alana, if you are able to speak to this, but Ken McDonald is asking, do you know of some Indigenous brass players, and how should we cultivate talent from Indigenous communities?
Wonderful question. I think that Sam has answered this in her segment, where she was talking about just creating relationship. And yeah, you can sort of do a talent search and see if there happens to be some brass players who are also Indigenous. But if you're looking at creating an environment where brass players can really excel in Indigenous communities, then you'd be looking at something like Sam was doing, where she was partnering with some sort of education institute who already had positive relationships. And I think it just comes down to relationship first. So you go in with the goal of relationship, not with the goal of brass players. And out of that relationship, then you can go on to your second goal, which is how can we create amazing musicians out of these kids, or these whoever you're talking to, and also noting that there's a huge population of Indigenous people in urban centers too. So reaching out to your friendship center, partnering with people who already have those relationships.
Yeah,
I'll end there.
Wonderful. So thank you to everybody that was part of this panel. And we're just going to close this segment with some music from Samantha and Walter Whitebear, and tune in about 15 minutes for our next session, which talks about whole body health. And we're looking forward to that. Thank you.